Welcome to the last episode of Around the SEC, where we take a trip around the greatest conference in the nation, following the biggest storylines and making bold predictions. I'm your host, Mikayla Kelly.
And I'm Micah Farmer. Today we will of course be discussing the college football playoff rankings that sent the world into a tizzy, the Heisman finalists, New Year's 6 matchups, and even be picking some superlatives. All that and more today on Around the SEC.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Around the SEC. It's a little bittersweet because this has been such a fun few months, but since I'm graduating on Saturday, this is my last show ever with Eagle Eye, so we're going to make sure it's a fun one. Well, Micah, what a football season this has been.
Yes.
How are you feeling looking back on what this season was, especially now that it's getting flipped on its head come next year?
I think this was a really good season. I think it is sad to see institutions like the Pac-12 see conferences get blown up because they were so good this year. I feel like in the playoff era, this has been one of the best years of each conference had a chance this year, and we'll get into that a bit more later. But I am sad to see the landscape change the way it is with realignment, but I've really enjoyed this season.
I have to agree. I think this was the best way they could have went out with this era of college football. You bring up the Pac-12. How sad was it to see the mascots all gather together at that Pac-12 championship game, which that game and those two teams will go down in history, and what a great way for that conference to go out.
I've watched those two teams play every Saturday.
Oh, 100%, and they'll be in the same conference, so this isn't the last of them. I'm not sure how excited I am to see these super conferences start to form, and we're heading towards money taking priority.
You're going to have the ESPN League and the Fox League eventually. That's what you're going to get.
What an exciting season. So many good teams. I hope we continue to see this as the playoffs expand. But let's jump right into the biggest news from the weekend. And that's, of course, the college football playoff rankings that have officially been set. And the final four are number 1, Michigan, number 2, Washington, number 3, Texas, and controversial number 4, Alabama. Now we'll definitely get into the nitty-gritty of it all, but before that, Micah, how does this Final Four compare to what you thought it would have been?
I honestly don't think this is too far off. I had Georgia at the start of the year instead of Alabama, but Georgia was close. I did have Texas. I did have Michigan. Washington, for me, came out of nowhere a bit. So credit to Washington this season. They did great, but 2 for 4 isn't bad, so.
I honestly don't really remember, other than having Michigan as my set team from the beginning of the year. I think that was kind of the only one, unless Ohio State happened to beat them. I think that was the one we all kind of had locked in. I really didn't think Georgia was going to get knocked at the end. When it comes to Washington, I've definitely been rocking with them since the beginning, but I did think whoever had won that Oregon-Washington matchup would have gotten in, and I thought Oregon had a strong chance to do it, and they didn't. So what did you kind of think going into Sunday, though, what the rankings would have been? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
I have to disagree on this. I think 2 things can be true at once here. 1, I think Alabama will put up a better fight in the playoff than Florida State. However, I think it is also true Florida State went undefeated in a Power 5 conference and did absolutely nothing wrong all year. And you're going to leave them out just because Jordan Travis goes down with injury? What are we doing here? Why are we leaving an undefeated Power 5 conference champion out? Are we just saying, okay, well, maybe just have your quarterback not get hurt, and then we'll let you in? I think this is ridiculous. I think Florida State was robbed, though I do think Alabama is a very good team, and I think they will compete in the playoffs. I think this was Florida State's spot.
Well, like you mentioned, interestingly enough, the committee felt that 2 11-1 teams were more deserving than an undefeated Power 5 champion, and Florida State was left out. And the committee, as you said, claims this is solely based on Jordan Travis's injury. Are you buying this? Because I'm not. You can't sit here and tell me that, oh, he's injured, they won't be able to put up a fight. One, I think that's just disrespectful to the team in general, to the backup who's out on the concussion, who would have had a month to come back, and who's to say that he wasn't the next big thing sitting on the bench all season, and
we just didn't get to see him play. Rodemaker played a lot in 2021. Are we just ignoring that? And he was serviceable during that time, and this defense has been elite all year. The defensive line is one of the best in college football, and we're just disregarding all of that. We're ignoring the 21 other players on the field. This is just ridiculous.
I came in thinking it was a lock that they were going to be number 3. I thought it was going to be Michigan, Washington, Florida State, And then I don't care that Alabama's in. Let's get that straight. I think every person is like, oh, Auburn fans don't want to see Alabama back in. But I don't think that's the case. If that's who they thought should have been the fourth one, good for you. But I'm just not a big fan of this whole, well, the best teams go in. But you can't prove best, because you could be like, well, I think Auburn could go beat all these teams. Not saying they would do that, but you could think that. I could think that Georgia could beat Alabama again if they were to rematch. You could go back and forth saying these are the best teams, but until I see a team lose, what are you going based off of?
You can't use subjective criteria for a playoff like this, because if you're, like you said, trying to justify best, the best team might win 8 times out of 10, but we might see one of the other 2 during the season. So I think this criteria is ridiculous. This committee can basically do whatever they want to, and I am so looking forward to when we have official tie-ins next year for the playoff, and then we get to argue over which team around the 11 and 12 mark got absolutely robbed. So,
well, we all know the reason behind this, and they can claim injury, they can claim this, but we all know the real reason, and it's this: because which conference brings in the most money?
It's the SEC.
It's the SEC. Especially Alabama, which you could argue that they left the wrong SEC team out, depending on how you think. Because if you were going to just screw over Florida State, why put them at 5? How does Georgia drop from 1 to 6 because of a 3-point loss to Alabama?
I don't think any of it makes any sense. I think Texas kind of presented a weird wild card here as a conference champion with a loss to a good but not amazing Oklahoma team that also had that win over Alabama. I think if Alabama's loss was to any other team on the schedule other than Texas, I think we might look at a Texas team being left out right now with Alabama and Florida State both in. So I think the Texas win over Alabama really presented a wild card in this situation that kind of just threw everything else out of whack.
Which I definitely agree with that, because at least if you had put all the undefeated teams in, the undefeated Power 5, Liberty's not getting in, unfortunately.
Why not? Robbed!
But at least if they had left Texas out, if they had left Alabama out, if they left Georgia out, you could have rotated any of them in the 4 spots, and I don't think people would be as upset as they are right now, because there's justifications for anyone. If you have a loss, then there's a chance you get left out. You know that. But in terms of Florida State, you might as well just told them at the beginning of the season, well, have fun this season.
Yeah.
Enjoy your wins. Enjoy your ACC championship.
Enjoy the Orange Bowl.
You guys are lesser than, which is kind of interesting considering the ACC had a better record against the SEC this year in games inter-conference. But it is what it is.
Florida State beat LSU by pretty much the same amount as Alabama.
Right.
So are we just going to ignore that?
Yeah, we are.
I don't.
And it is what it is. And if I were them, I'd tap out of this bowl game, which the snub bowl you could call it, between Florida State and Georgia. But it is what it is, and it comes down to money. They're never going to say it, but we know that's what it comes down to. And we know Saban gets what he wants, so.
Yep. Speaking of Saban, Alabama obviously in this 4 spot, and they will be taking on Michigan. I know all year we talked about, did Michigan get the punishment they deserve for the sign stealing and Connor Stallions, but is this the punishment that Michigan has been waiting on, having to play Nick Saban and Alabama in a playoff semifinal?
You know, I didn't think about this until someone pointed out to me yesterday, but this is quite a way to give Michigan their backhanded punishment they didn't get, because let's be real, suspending Harbaugh, what did that do?
Nothing.
They played 6 games without him. In fact, suspending him, I think, helped them play their best game of the season against Penn State. I don't think they've came across a defense like Alabama yet. I think they're good. There's just not a lot that's proven how good they are. There's a lot of arguments that Washington could have jumped them in the number 1 rankings.
I personally don't agree with that. I think this Michigan team, even though they haven't played the strongest schedule, they've been the only team that has consistently dominated everyone that they are supposed to dominate. And I think the way the Ohio State game went makes us kind of forget the quality of that Ohio State defense. That is not a bad Ohio State defense that I would put close to, if not on the same level as the Alabama defense. I think the Ohio State offense is what held that team back. So I think Michigan does have experience. I think Ohio State is a really good team. Although what I'm worried about for the Wolverines is sometimes it doesn't matter how good you are when you're going up against Saban with a month of preparation.
That's what I'm saying. It's just somehow they're going to come in and get it done because that's what they do. And it's really hard to cross over from the big. Yes, you have Ohio State. They played Ohio State. That's a good team. And just coming in as a Big Ten school playing an SEC team, regardless of talent, sometimes it just comes down to can live up under pressure. And I'm not saying Michigan can't get it done, but I just see them sneaking in, and I think if they beat Michigan, Alabama's winning yet another national championship, which is unfortunate. But looking to the other side, how do you see the Washington-Texas matchup going?
So this was one of my favorite hot takes from the beginning of the year is Texas is winning the national title. And after the Oklahoma game, I was worried they wouldn't have a shot, but they're there now. Xavier Worthy went down with injury in the Big 12 title game, but x-rays were negative. So he has a whole month to heal up for this game. Texas's run defense, I think, will be able to shut down Dylan Johnson. They've been elite all year. Quinn Ewers is healthy. He looked great in the Big 12 title game.
Can we talk about that game?
Yeah.
I think that is actually what sealed them their spot.
Yes, that was
they were
an
running over
victory.
that Oklahoma State team, which that's not a bad team.
No, not at all.
And they absolutely plowed through them in that game. I was watching them being like, if it comes down to it, they get the 4th spot. But as we saw, both Alabama and Texas get in, and I have a feeling that'll be the national championship matchup, and it'll be an interesting rematch. But
it's all going to come down to the Texas secondary. That's been the Texas weakness all year, and the Washington strength is that passing game with Rome Odunze, with Jalen McMillan, with Jalen Polk. So a slightly weak Texas secondary versus that receiver trio and Michael Penix, I think that's going to be where this game's decided, but I still think Texas comes out on top.
I think it's interesting because they've been treated like underdogs, Huskies. It's, funny. But after seeing how they can just handle themselves so well, if you watch Michael Penix, which he's not by any means carrying the team on his back, I think Rome Odunze goes before any of the Heisman finalists, by the way, which we'll get to in a second. He can just sling that ball down the field. He comes off that end of the game, it didn't even look like he broke a sweat. Didn't look stressed out that whole game, and I think their poise is what will help them
the issue
in this
for
game.
Penix is in games this year where he has been pressured, where the offensive line can't hold up, that's when he starts to crack. You look at games like Arizona State, like Washington State. I know that's a rivalry game, so you kind of throw a bit out the window. But the Arizona State game, the Arizona State defensive line dominated Washington up front, and Michael Penix started to freak out a little bit. I think if Texas can get pressure, which I do think they're capable of doing, that's how you shut down Washington, is you make Penix freak out. He has athleticism, but he's not a Jaden Daniels type creator out of the pocket. So if you can get him moving around back there uncomfortable, I think that's how you slow down Washington.
Well, while it might not have been the results we necessarily saw coming, I think it'll be an interesting playoffs, one to watch, and you know what happens. Any given day, any team can win. So we'll see. But switching topics a little, with the end of the college football season comes a very important award, and that's, of course, the Heisman Trophy. LSU quarterback Jaden Daniels, Washington quarterback Michael Penix Jr., Oregon quarterback Bo Nix, and Ohio State wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. are all headed up to New York in hopes of some new hardware. I don't think either of us were surprised by this Final Four, but this past weekend has shifted the favorite. Who's your pick for the Heisman?
Well, first off, I want to say, though I'm not surprised by this Final Four, I am disappointed. Marvin Harrison Jr. is a great player, but Ollie Gordon of Oklahoma State has had one of the best seasons in college football this year, and it's gone under the radar. I think he deserved a spot in New York. I think the best player in college football this season, or at least top 3, has been UCLA edge rusher Laiatu Latu, and he is getting no credit whatsoever. So, unfortunately, he's a defensive player, and unless your name's Charles Woodson, you don't get the Heisman. So, tough for him, but of these Final Four, I think Jaden Daniels is by far the most deserving. Bo Nix and Michael Penix have both had great seasons, but Jaden Daniels is on another level this year, both passing and rushing. He has been far and away, in my opinion, the most productive player in college football, and so I think this should be his Heisman Trophy because you know what? He can't play defense.
He can't. And had that team had a defense, we'd be talking about them in this Final Four.
This is a 2019 LSU level offense with a defense bought off the street at a bad Walmart somewhere.
Which I think Jaden Daniels would go down as one of the best quarterbacks in college football. It's just unfortunate he didn't get that big shining moment. But like you said, when Joe Burrow was at LSU, that's an NFL starting lineup on that team. They're all starting in the NFL right now. Jaden Daniels just didn't get as blessed, but look what he did with what he had. He's one of only 2 players in history to average 400-plus total yards of offense, beating Joe Burrow in that category, by the way. Also the 5th player in SEC history to have 50 touchdowns in a single season. 50 touchdowns? 50. That's crazy to think about. coming from both passing and rushing. What a dual threat he is.
And he only threw 4 interceptions. It's not like he was gunslinging, turning the ball over a lot. He only turned it over 4 times through the air. So as you say, that stat, the 5th player in SEC history with 50 touchdowns, you know what the other 4 did? They went out and won the Heisman. So give Jaden Daniels his Heisman.
Right, like you said, those 4 quarterbacks being Bryce Young, Joe Burrow, Cam Newton, and Tim Tebow, which everyone likes to point out, oh, their team lost 3 times, this, that, and the
Lamar Jackson's team lost 3 times.
Lamar
He won the
Jackson,
Heisman.
Tim Tebow, RG3, and Auburn fans, not to mention, Bo Jackson won the Heisman on a 3-loss team. You can't really count the losses, especially considering one of their losses, they put 45 points on the board.
What more do you want him to do?
So I think he likely jumped as the favorite now that Bo Nix has 2 losses under his belt. Not to say that any of them couldn't win. I do think any of them could, but
they don't give it to Marvin Harrison Jr. They don't.
Unless you're a quarterback, it's really hard unless it's a down quarterback year to get that award.
Like the Devontae Smith year.
We'll see Marvin Harrison go in top 10 in this draft.
Oh, for sure. And he deserves it. But elite NFL prospect and Heisman Trophy winner are 2 very different things.
And the way I see this is the same way I see the MVP for the NFL, this is not how they treat it either, but this is how I would treat it. And I heard this analogy last year. If you were to take this one player off the team, how big of a difference would it make? And that's why I personally felt J.J. Jefferson should have won that award last year.
Well, if we're talking about that, why not give it to Jordan Travis if he's apparently such a big difference for Florida
I don't know. I'm still looking for his invite. It must have gotten lost in the mail. I don't really know. But
no, let's send Marvin Harrison Jr. there.
But I think Jaden Daniels has jumped as the favorite. I've thought he would for a while now. A lot of people doubted it. Bo Nix lost. And so I think he's getting it, and the SEC will be bringing home their 15th Heisman winner of all time in Jaden Daniels, and he really deserves it.
For sure. Now on to some non-playoff New Year's 6 Bowl games, and they feature 3 SEC teams this year, Georgia, Missouri, and Ole Miss. Georgia will take on Florida State in the Orange Bowl, Missouri will face Ohio State in the Cotton Bowl, and Ole Miss will take on Penn State in the Peach Bowl. How do you view each of these 3 SEC teams' chances to win their respective matchups, and which of these games are you most excited for?
Well, the Orange Bowl's looking like the Snub Bowl. I think it's getting renamed, as it should. But I don't know. I think Georgia comes in and wins that big, but how awesome would it be if they just kind of threw it to Florida State to give a big, you-know-what,
Let them claim the national title. Let them win that game.
At this point, to me, bowl games are bowl games. I do think seeing those 3 in those types of games just proves how good the SEC is, and I guess that is why they hold teams to such a high caliber that are in that division, in the conference. And so I just think it's a testament. How awesome is it to see Missouri in there?
Yes, I am looking forward to that game so much.
If you told me Missouri was a top 10 team ending the season, I would have thought you were crazy. Ole Miss, too. People were doubting them. And so I think it's awesome to see them in there.
I like this Ole Miss Penn State game because I feel like it's very much
a great
2
matchup.
Mirror teams of 2 teams that are never quite able to win their division, but they're always right there in Ole Miss and Penn State. So Penn State brings the defense, Ole Miss brings the offense. This should be a really entertaining game. And then for Missouri, Ohio State, I cannot wait to watch Luther Burden try to pick apart this Ohio State secondary. I think this will be very fun. Then if Ohio State commits too much on that, they might get destroyed by Cody Schrader. I don't think Missouri's going to have a lot of opt-outs because a lot of their players are young, so should be exciting to watch.
Also, look at the state of Ohio State right now. Transfer portal just opened.
Yeah,
and
McCord's gone.
Everyone's hitting it. So it's going to be interesting to see. Hopefully the SEC, all the teams end on a high note. You'd love to see it for the conference. And it's just a testament to how good they were this season and how exciting it's going to be when you can see them playing potentially next year when the playoff expands.
For sure. When we come back, we are picking superlatives right here on Around the SEC. You don't want to miss it.
Welcome back to Around the SEC. Now to wrap up this awesome season that we've had, we wanted to do some superlatives. So starting out, SEC Head Coach of the Year, who was actually named SEC Head Coach of the Year, well-deservingly, has to go to Eli Drinkwitz. And this was a guy I think was on the hot seat at the beginning of this season.
Definitely a lot of pressure on him after some underwhelming seasons. And then this year, his recruits finally have developed. Sophomore Luther Burden, Brady Cook developing. I think you're seeing his good recruiting finally pay off. So credit to Drinkwitz, credit to Missouri. Great year for them.
This was one of the best seasons Missouri's had in a long time. And they're not done yet because I think there's a lot of guys coming back to this team next year.
Pretty much everyone's coming back.
So great season for him. Excited to see the future of Missouri, and what a great season they had ending at number 9. Now, of course, this one was a pretty easy one. Best offense in the SEC has to go to LSU.
Not just best offense in the SEC.
Best in the country. Highest scoring offense in the country.
Highest scoring, most yards per game, no-brainer. Give it to LSU.
And a team that beat this LSU offense, the best defense, I think has to go to Alabama. I think at the beginning of the season, they're lucky they didn't lose games because I think the defense got them there.
Yeah, you know what they say, defense wins championships. And if Alabama wins one this year, it's going to be because of this defense. This is one of the best edge rush duos in football between Chris Braswell and the other guy, Dallas Turner. That's his name, Dallas Turner, who has played very well this season. Then the corners, Khalil McKinstry, Terry and Arnold. And these are all NFL draft material guys. One guy I do want to give a shout out to on this defense is freshman safety Caleb Downs, who has been, if not the best, one of the best freshmen in college football this year, who's been playing amazingly for the Tide. So shout out Caleb Downs and shout out the Alabama defense. The offense, of course, clicked later down the season, but I think they have to be really grateful that they had the defense they did. And now they're kind of just good on both sides of the ball, so we'll see what happens come postseason. Then most improved has to go to Missouri, coming off last season. 6-7 last year. 6-7. Losing to a pretty bad Auburn team. I don't think anyone had hope for this team going into the season. 10 wins, though. 10-2.
10 wins. If you told me that, I would have said, you're crazy.
Yeah.
Ending at number 9, insane. Going to a huge bowl game. You got to be proud of this team. For sure. This is a team I would not want to be playing right now. Had it
not
been,
at all.
If the playoff expansion was right now, this is a hot team that I wouldn't want to be playing, and I'm excited to see what this team looks like next year.
Listen, the 8-9 game we would have gotten between Oregon and Missouri, who wouldn't have watched that?
Then we've got the most surprising team, which we kind of each picked our own team, so I'll let you start with yours.
So I started with Missouri, who we've talked about a lot this
Micah doesn't like Missouri or anything. I don't know if you guys have been keeping track, but
but this has been the Missouri year for me. I've been super impressed with their offense, their defense, the coaching job Drinkwitz has done. So coming off of 6-7, like we said, definitely a surprise to see them at 10-2 and ranked ahead of your most surprising team.
Not too far behind, though, is the Ole Miss Rebels, which people had finishing at the bottom of the SEC West, and they were far from it. They were hanging in there for a while. They just couldn't get it done against the two beasts of Georgia and Alabama. But I was really surprised to see how well Jackson Dart did this season.
Oh, yeah, he was great this season.
I think he was up there in one of the top SEC quarterback spots.
For sure. At the halfway point of the season, he was leading Ole Miss in passing and rushing yards. He did everything for that offense this year.
High-scoring offense. Quinshad Judkins finally stepped up midway through the season. I do think Lane Kiffin's doing a good job over there, despite what everyone thinks. And so, for that reason, I'm picking the Ole Miss Rebels for the most surprising team this season. Then we've got the biggest upset game, which there wasn't that many this season. And this one, I almost forgot about until I looked way back, and I think we both agree that is Florida upsetting Tennessee in the swamp.
Forget, guys. I'm a Florida fan. This is like my only happy spot of the year with this team. I did not forget. This Florida team was not good. Tennessee finished ranked, and just the swamp environment, I think, carried Florida in this one, and they were able to knock off Tennessee convincingly as well.
I think this upset looks better now come the end of the season than it did at the beginning because Florida had some rough losses down the stretch, and to come out early on, beat them at home, what a win that was for us. I remember that was week 3, and we had a home game. I left to go watch this game, and so we saw how Tennessee was last season. Obviously not the same this season, but a big win for Florida, especially saying they had the hardest schedule this season. And so that was definitely their biggest win of the season, and probably the biggest upset. Wasn't picking Alabama upsetting Georgia because I don't think that was a big upset, to be honest with you. So for that reason, this is the biggest upset of the season. Now we've got the most disappointing, which we also are split on. And I think you're a little biased because it's your team. You're a little disappointed in that.
I am, but I also feel like being a Florida fan, I know a lot about the ins and outs of this team. And last year, 6-7, bowl loss to Oregon State, but a lot of young talent looking to develop. I know Anthony Richardson left for the draft, but Graham Mertz was good this year. The pass game was not the issue. It's continuous conservative play calling from Billy Napier, a defense that despite continuous changes still cannot tackle, poor discipline across the entire team, a rushing game that was projected to be one of the top 3 in the SEC coming into this year that ended up being nowhere close with Montreal Johnson and Trevor Etienne. So disappointment all around for Florida.
I can't say I was too surprised about the Florida. I think at the beginning of the season, I was riding on that they had the hardest schedule in the SEC. I still do think that looking back on the season. I think there were some issues with the coaching. You lost a lot of guys. I think there is potential on this team for them to come back a little bit better next year. But my biggest disappointment, as per usual, every season has to go to Arkansas. And that is because they wasted who they had at quarterback. KJ Jefferson looked unproductive to what he is.
Well, the offensive line was trying to get him killed.
Couldn't protect. I watched the footage from the Auburn-Arkansas game, and I was like, he has no room. That pocket collapses in 5 seconds.
Yeah, the Auburn defensive line looked like the 49ers against that offensive line.
There's no surprise he's hitting the transfer portal. I would too. It's wasted talent. And bringing in Bobby Petrino at the end of the season instead of maybe just firing your head coach.
There's a fun storyline.
That one game against Mississippi State too, just very disappointing. It wasn't even middle of the pack like they normally are. They were downright bad this season. And I said at the beginning of the season they were sleeper. No, they weren't.
We both did.
No, they were not. So interested to see the future of this program because I have a feeling Petrino might sneak his way into that head coaching position. But
that would
a desperate look for the Razorbacks up in Fayetteville. But don't call us biased, I promise. But best first-year head coach.
Well, the other options weren't that good.
Exactly.
So Hugh Freeze was the only first-year head coach in the SEC to have his team make a bowl game, Auburn going back bowling, and this defense was very, very good this season. It was just held back by a lackluster passing game and an offense that struggled to get going at times, but on top of that, recruiting for Auburn and Hugh Freeze. The flip of Cam Coleman earlier this week is massive for the Tigers. Him and Perry Thompson should be a great pairing for the Auburn receiver room. So I've been very impressed with what I've seen from Hugh Freeze this season.
Exactly. And I think on paper, the casuals, as you call them, you would look at this season and be like, well, this was pretty mediocre. But compared to last season, at least Auburn's making a bowl game this season.
Team culture feels much more positive too right now.
It is so different. And it's like you said, it's the recruiting aspect that he's winning in here. He was kind of left with what he was left with. Brian Harston was arguably one of the worst in the transfer portal in the recruiting aspect, if not the worst. But I think he's done a great job. I think he's fit into Auburn really well, got the fans excited again, and I think he's got a lot of talent coming in, and so it's only up from here, I think. I hope, because can't do another six-win season next season. But
well, we can. It's possible.
And I wouldn't be surprised, but you know what? It'll still always be the best atmosphere in the SEC in Jordan-Hare, which, not that we've experienced it that much, but I think it's deserving this season because of how bad it was last season.
The atmospheres for the Georgia and Alabama games this year, two teams that Auburn had no business even competing with, to lose by a total of 10 points across those two games. This says a lot about the crowd, because that was what kept Auburn in these games. The energy from the crowd. The third quarter versus Alabama, the crowd was the reason Auburn played so well in that period of time. Alabama could not get it going, and it was all due to the energy in the stadium and the crowd.
I think people underestimate how crowds can affect the game, especially in the SEC.
I did. As someone, a freshman this year, coming into Jordan-Hare for the first time, you hear all the stories, it's such a hard place to play, the crowd's crazy. And the first couple games, UMass, Samford, you're like, okay, this is cool. But then showing up to the student section for that Georgia game and feeling the energy in the stadium, you start to understand it.
In which, I know you weren't here last year, and so you haven't experienced it other than this year, but last year people stopped showing up to games. People were done. People were over this team, and to come back and you could feel that people are passionate about this team again, and I think that's a testament to Freeze. It's a testament to how the guys are playing this season, what the future is going to look like, and there's finally hope for this team again, which is all you can really ask for. I don't think anyone else really expected a much better season. I think this is a pretty successful season for a first-year head coach, and I think it's only up from here. And Jordan-Hare is a special place. It always will be. I'll be biased for the rest of the time. I don't think there's a better place to play. Even Joe Shiesty himself said it was harder to play than Penn State. Now we're going to get into some fun awards. And we start off with the only award Vandy could ever win. And that is the Hard Hat Award, and that goes to their beautiful stadium. Pictures taken by me. Obviously, all this construction makes for a great game day atmosphere. Who wouldn't want to be there?
Honestly, the scoreboard held up by 2 cranes is such a nice touch. You get to see that.
Creativity.
Yeah, you get to see the Vandy academic prowess on display with the engineering used to hold up the scoreboard. So credit to Vandy.
In all honesty, I am excited to see what this looks like. I saw the plans while I was there. I think it could be a cool stadium. Hopefully, it draws some people in because right now it's like a neutral site playing at that place.
Nothing like a great atmosphere to go 3-9 in.
Now we got the Bank Breaker Award, and that, of course, goes to Texas A&M for the firing of Jimbo Fisher.
But it's okay, because oil money.
The most expensive firing in college football history, and it's not even close. So props to them. They probably have the money for it.
Oh, for sure. They'll hire someone else, fire him in 2 years, pay him $100 million, and repeat.
They can hire me. I'll do that. Get fired.
I could be incompetent for $77 million.
Then we have the Now That's SEC Football Award, and if you can't see, it was the crazy 7-3 victory Mississippi State had over Arkansas.
Just a pure offensive offensive showcase here is what we witnessed. Arkansas unable to move the ball, but that's okay because Mississippi State also was unable to move the ball. This was not even good defense. This was just horrific offense on both sides and really epitomizes Arkansas' season.
Definitely a disgrace to the conference, but, you know, that's the SEC for you. Then we have and this one cuts deep, the You Did What Award, and that goes to Auburn's 31-10 loss at home to New Mexico State.
Guys, 9-3, it's still terrible. 9-3. We provided a team with a way to get to 10 wins on the season, so very generous of the Auburn Tigers. New Mexico State with a great year this year, and please, Auburn, never do this again.
Which, it's not the actual score that's the You Did What, it's how much they paid to lose to them by. But
$1.8 million.
I hope they spend that money well, and I hope that nothing ever tops this game because this was the worst game in Auburn football history arguably, and I was down on the field for it. It was awesome. Lastly, this one cuts even deeper, just to add salt to the wound, and that's the Miami Award. Snatched from the jaws of victory, the mill throw.
Yeah, so I was on the field for this one, so maybe we just need to stay off the field is what we're learning. We could not be allowed on the field.
Unfortunately, I think.
I was at the other end zone, and I saw Milroe let the ball go, and because of the angle I was at, I could not see the catch. And I realized what had happened when I saw the Alabama players run off the sidelines.
It would really only happen to us, but we'll get them next time, hopefully.
We'll get them.
Unfortunately, I was crying in the stands after, but I wasn't chosen as one of the people to be shown crying on TV, but I was there, don't worry. And this will go down as one of the most painful days of my life, I'm not going to lie. And as much as Alabama fans want to claim that this is their kick six, it's not. But if we had just won it, they wouldn't be in the playoffs right now. And
shout out to Zion Puckett for doing nothing. And I know it's DJ James that got beat, but shout out to Zion Puckett for doing nothing because he allowed 2 touchdowns in this game.
Maybe one day the luck will change, but for today, that is all we have for you today on Around the SEC. It's been so fun this whole semester getting to do this show, and we're so grateful to anyone that's tuned in to watch. I've had a great time. I know you have too.
Yes, it's been amazing.
So fun working together. And with that, I'm Mikayla Kelly.
I'm Micah Farmer.
Thanks for watching.